Okay, great. We are recording, and I'm going to get our session going here. Thank you all so much for attending our session today. The Pittsburgh 48-Hour Film Project presents Film Insurance 101. I'm Jake Gaynard, an independent filmmaker and the 2024 Pittsburgh 48-Hour Film Project city producer. For anybody who doesn't know, the Pittsburgh 48-Hour Film Project is a project where teams of filmmakers come together to make a film in 48 hours. They're given a prop, a line of dialogue, a character, and then two genres at random, and they're asked to create a film, a 4 to 7 minute film in 48 hours. And then a few weeks later, we will premiere those films at the Carnegie Science Center in the Rangos Giant Theater. And then the best film will be chosen by a panel of 3 industry judges and the audience. And the winning film will then go on to represent us next year at Seattle at Filmapalooza, which is the gathering point for all city winners for the 48-Hour Film Project. And then a selection of those films will be taken to Cannes to be screened at the Cannes Short Film Corner. We just got back from last year's winners being at Filmapalooza, which was in Lisbon, in Portugal, and 2 winning films from Pittsburgh will screen at the Cannes Short Film Corner in May. So Pittsburgh will be represented in May. Both Conrad Studios and Bad Dates made films which will be screened. And as a matter of fact, members of some of those winning teams are on this call right now. So that's really great. Just so you know, some upcoming events along with this event, our next in-person meetup for the 2024 Pittsburgh 48-Hour Film Project will be April 2nd at 6:30 p.m. at Bold Escape Rooms. We'll have a watch party to look at the last 8 years or so of winning 48-hour films. We'll be able to network with folks, get a tour of Bold Escape Rooms, and then some people will even be able to do the escape room if that's what they want to do. And then at that event, we'll discuss and release the link for the actors to sign up for in-person 1-minute monologues for actors who are looking to try to audition and get onto teams for the 48-Hour Film Project. Those actors' auditions will be on April 13th from 12 to 3 at Ensemble Actors Studio. And team leaders and directors will be in attendance, but we'll also be reporting those so that other people can check them out. The 2024 Pittsburgh 48-Hour Film Project is sponsored by Carnegie Science Center, House of Wax, Cine Lease, Rankin Community Center, Silent Visual Media, Bold Escape Rooms, Women in Film and Media Pittsburgh, Film Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Film Office, Lightbulb Rentals, WQED Film Academy, Ensemble Actors Studio, Studio Me, the Cinema Psycho Show, Riley's Poorhouse, Goat Milk Fudge Productions, and Litterini Travel, and last but certainly not least, Confluence Productions. You can learn a lot more about our events and sign up your own team and learn more about the 48-Hour Film Project at www.48hourfilm.com/Pittsburgh. We're in webinar mode for this Zoom. So if you have something you want to say, you need to raise your hand. Joel, I see your hand raised, but you might not have something to say right now. I will call on you as we go when there's a chance for people to speak. And there will be time for questions at the end of our event. I'd like to take a moment and introduce our companies and our panelists who are with us today. Athos Insurance specializes in sports and entertainment industries. It was founded by Katherine Wong in 2012 after many years of specializing in the entertainment and sports insurance field. Together with their Chief Operating Officer, Aylene Villarin, they are leading the Athos team to revolutionize digital insurance solutions. Of course, just a little bit more info about Katherine, who you do see on this call. After graduating from UCLA with a degree in business economics, Kat started her career in the insurance industry, immersing herself in extreme sports coverage. She soon found her niche in the small to mid-sized entertainment industry sector at a national insurance brokerage and began creating automated online programs to optimize business operations. Kat worked with insurance carriers to revamp archaic business practices and introduced more efficient processes to reduce costs and bring savings to customers. She created the concept of instant insurance for equipment coverage, where customers can immediately purchase a policy, insurance certificates, and manage their policies, including renewing them online. After gaining years of experience and lending her expertise to other insurance companies, Kat decided to create her own company, Athos Insurance, launched in 2012. So please give it up for Kat. Yay!
Yay.
Thank you, Kat, for being with us.
Of course.
Also with us is Aylene Villarin, Athos Insurance's Chief Operating Officer. A Los Angeles native, Aylene graduated from UCLA with a degree in political science. Go Bruins! And had dreams of pursuing a career in law. It was during law school, while interning for a federal judge, that Aylene decided to reevaluate her life goals. She eventually took a break from school and accepted a position at a corporate insurance brokerage. She enjoyed the work, climbed the ranks, and eventually managed the company's online platform for one of their biggest programs, Inland Marine, which is production equipment coverage. She thrived off the challenges of the job and began to develop a knack for analyzing risks for complex problems that permeate the entertainment insurance industry. She joined Athos shortly after Katherine Wong founded the company in 2012, and Aylene has been an integral part of Athos's growth and development ever since. Aylene enjoys foodie adventures with her husband and kids, and she loves spending time with her 2 corgis. Please give it up for Aylene. And last but certainly not least, please welcome Brian Hartman. Film producer Brian Hartman has accumulated hundreds of production credits throughout his career and has consulted on many others. As a producer, he has completed 15 feature films, many foreign productions, a dozen television pilots, countless music videos, and a handful of documentaries. Beginning as a location scout for The Silence of the Lambs in 1991, Brian has since worked through virtually every department, totaling over 60 feature films. Prior to producing film and television, Brian gathered additional production experience from working on hundreds of national commercial shoots for such companies as McDonald's, Burger King, Pepsi, Coke, IBM, Macy's, IKEA, Best Buy, NASCAR, and more. From being involved in so many different styles of productions, Brian's strength is in the physical production process, in considering, and he is considered much higher than the industry standard for a producer. Brian's most recent work is the feature film Unsinkable, which will soon premiere in theaters all over North America and Europe. Please give it up for Brian. Thank you, Brian, for being with us. Okay, so we have the 3 of you, and I'm so glad that we do. My first question for you is, I'm a filmmaker who has been making shorts with my friends, but I'm starting to take it to the next level. What types of insurance do I need?
All right, so I'll start with this one. All right, so we always, when people basically apply for insurance, the first thing we ask them is what or who do you need to satisfy the requirements for, right? So that's usually kind of like our blueprint of how to set up the insurance. Like, number one, are you getting a film permit from the city, or are you renting equipment from a rental house, right? and, or a location, even just like a private location, right? So based on that, we basically would tell all our clients that we need to see their insurance requirements, because that's going to dictate what they need. And if we know all of those up front, then we can really try to package the insurance in the best way, right? So this is going to be things such as general liability, right? And I'll go and explain what these are, but the main things are the general liability insurance, the equipment insurance, and workers' comp. If you have special hazards, like such as like you're flying a drone or things like that, you have to get special coverage for that, like the drone insurance. So with general liability insurance, that's basically going to, if you need to make sure it includes third-party property damage, which is going to cover the location if you damage that location. General liability also covers if a bystander or spectator gets injured. So that's not a cast or crew member. That's going to be just, some random person walking by your film shoot. If, let's say, they get injured, they trip on a cord, camera falls on them, and they sue you guys, that's general liability insurance. And then the equipment insurance is going to be, to cover the gear that is being rented, right? And that even includes people that you're hiring onto the production to bring their gear. That's actually considered hiring equipment and is also considered rented equipment. So these are kind of the main things. Workers' comp is a big one too. That's going to cover if the cast and crew actually gets injured, right? So that's a pretty important one as well. So based on, when we talk to people, we kind of ask all these questions, and then they will let us know, what they're looking for. Obviously, workers' comp is very expensive, right? So some people don't want to get that. And we have an alternative called accident medical insurance, which isn't like workers' comp, but it does cover out-of-pocket medical expenses related to the filming. So those are the general types of insurance to consider when you're making a film.
Ooh, Brian, have you gotten all of those insurances? Are there any that we didn't mention that you feel like you often need?
Well, I mean, that's an incredibly detailed answer. It's hard to follow. The only thing that I would add would be like cast insurance. If you have a larger,
Right.
which I'm sure you're familiar with that. They to ensure the production based on an incapacitated actor or director or such, and then ultimately errors and omissions insurance, which I'm not sure if you mentioned that, but
Yes.
any copyright liability or lawsuits that come through the distribution process.
Right. So those are more for like so if you're going to go further down the line, right? Because the short film is kind of like when you're producing it, right?
Mhm.
The E&O is when you actually get picked up, right? And you're going to get distributed. So I think that's like, that's like definitely important to have. And then there's other coverages too, but to be honest, when we're talking about kind of like people starting out, they can't, there's cast covers, there's negative film, faulty stock, there's all these, extra
Right.
expenses, all these wonderful things to have. But generally when we're working with, people starting out, or maybe it's like their first film, they're usually not going to be able to obtain those just because of the costs. But there are those covers. So thank you, Ryan. I appreciate you bringing those up.
Yeah, I guess it's really like a balancing act. Like you don't want to get overwhelmed, but you do want to be safe, right?
Right.
And that's always trying to figure out like what can our production do. And I also think there's something, and Brian, I'm wondering about from your perspective on this, the budgeting for insurance coverage is so important, because if it's not in your budget and you don't raise the money for it, you just can't have it, you know?
Well,
Mhm.
true. However, as she was just pointing out, vendors will not allow you to rent their equipment without it. Very few locations will allow you to shoot there without it. So it's almost it's as important as the camera as far as production. You have to have it. So regardless of how whether you want to take risks or not, that doesn't mean other people are going to allow you to take risks with their property or their equipment. But you have to budget for it, unfortunately.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Let's talk about length of policies. Do I have to get it for a year? Do I have to get it for a month? How long do I have to have the insurance, and what kind of things can I ask?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think to kind of piggyback off of what Brian was saying in terms of costs, this is a good way to consider costs, right? So if you work with an insurance broker who really specializes in this type of insurance, they're a bit more flexible. Like for Athos, for example, we offer not just annual coverage, but short-term insurance. So like, let's say this is your only project for the year, or you don't have anything that's lined up yet, you can purchase short-term insurance just for that specific production, right? If you're a little bit more seasoned or things are picking back up, like what we saw, when things after, during, I guess, at the tail end of the pandemic, it was starting to get better. People were starting to get more projects in. Then you're like, okay, well, I have about 5 or 6 potentially in the next 12 months, 5 or 6 projects. I may consider an annual policy. So that's available as well. Those do tend to be more expensive, right? Because we're covering not just one production, but we're covering multiple projects, but those are available. So you want to make sure that you're working with an insurance broker who understands that, who understands your budget, and can really work with you to get it to that point. Now, of course, for us at Athos, we really service small to mid-size production companies, people that are just starting out. Obviously, we can insure feature films as well. But for us, when people come to us with their budget, we want to make sure that those budgets are realistic as well, right? So if they're coming and saying, "Oh, our budget's like $200 for insurance," right? We have to make sure we're providing them what they can afford for $200. And sometimes it doesn't work out. So I think it's also important when you're thinking about the length of time for these insurance to kind of make sure you're working within your budget as well. So yes, I guess the short answer to your question is there are such thing as short-term insurance, which is anything less than a year or for a specific production. And there's also annual coverage that tends to cover more than one production.
But it can be like, I know it could be a day, right? You could get it for
be
a day.
For sure. If you're only filming for a day, even just like a couple of hours, that would be a day of coverage. Yes, we do offer that as well.
I mean, good luck getting the gear rented and returned in a day.
And it does happen.
Like 3 days, but
yeah, it does happen. Yeah, people make it work. So yeah.
Do you feel like, Brian, almost holding insurance can be like a part of a producer's kit? Like you come with it.
It can, and I do carry, basic coverage, but each production is so different that to me it's it almost goes back to that budget question of, you have to look at the type of equipment that you're going to be using. So any sort of specialty equipment or a valuable vehicle or a fragile location, there's going to be a degree of coverage that's required that knowing that in advance is really important, because if you can't afford it, you need to bring those areas down a little bit, because they're just you simply won't be able to have those things without the proper coverage. And some I know with Haddads in Pittsburgh is actually requires the most insurance of any transportation company in the country by a mile. And so it's important. So when we rent trucks and trailers for them, and I know this doesn't count on the smaller films, I'm just using it as an example, is we always make sure we have a phone call with them to assure that we're getting the right policy, and they adjust theirs through time. So believe it or not, we actually have had to make adjustments on several occasions just with that one vendor, and that happens across the board. So yeah, that's the main thing, is you don't want to bind a policy that actually doesn't cover everything you want to do. So
I guess this brings up an interesting point, is like talking to the rental company and saying, what do you need? And then communicating that to the insurance company, and sort of creating a little network that says, like, this is what they need for what we want, and doing it far enough in advance to sort of help you do that. And even with the 48-hour film project, even though we're making the movies in 48 hours, if you need a camera a week in advance, if you don't have a camera to shoot your 48 on, and you're going to rent one, you probably know far enough in advance that you can set up a rental and do that kind of thing, and sort of try to figure out what tools you want to use in advance.
Also, I wanted to add that it doesn't, if you do it that way, people like myself who I'm not by no means an expert in insurance. I've had thousands of policies through the years. However, you just ask the vendors what you need, so I don't have to be as
Yeah.
smart as my fellow panelists here.
Yeah. I'm going to add to that too. Sorry, because this is actually very important. When you're making a project, it's so important to review those insurance requirements before you even sign it. Okay.
Mhm.
Because what happens is when you sign that contract that says, I'm going to provide all this insurance, now all of a sudden you're saying, I'm going to provide this insurance, even if it's ridiculous. Right. So you really should go review it, talk to the rep at that vendor. If you can try to negotiate it down even sometimes, because sometimes the requirements are kind of a little overkill, and which is fine, because it's to appeal to the masses, but maybe your specific project is less risky or just, doesn't have all that. So it's important to not sign away a contract that says you're going to cover all these things and you really don't, or you can't afford it. And then the other thing I was going to add is that the better you are at getting all your insurance requirements together up front and giving that to your insurance broker, the better off everyone will be. Because what ends up happening is, you may say, oh, you're more like reactive, right? And you say, oh, I now I need this. Oh no, now I need this. Oh no, now I need this. And then your broker's like, oh my gosh, if I just known all that up front, I could have got you this policy that's way cheaper, or this other thing. So we see that all the time, and it's, it's no one's fault. Everyone's just kind of like trying to do things last minute, but the more organized you can be up front really pays off, and helps everybody so that everyone can get everything you need up front. And so I just wanted to add that.
That's good. Important.
Yeah, sorry. Can I add something to Kat as well? Sorry, I'm just gonna piggyback off that. I think also to add to her, when in terms of organization, it's super important to have like a point person in your team to be in charge of insurance. So
Yeah.
what happens sometimes is we'll get multiple people calling and say, oh, did Sam call you or did Jack call you? We actually need this. Oh no, we already got that. And it becomes this whole, like, there's too many cooks in the kitchen scenario.
Mhm.
So you want to make sure there's one point person. That point person is someone that the insurance broker or the insurance folks that you're working with can get a hold of that person right away. And that person is in charge of all of your paperwork. They're the ones that have access to all the documents that you need to upload, because it's a lot of documentation that you're going to need to provide to vendors and, permit houses and things like that. So you want to have a point person on your team for that. That's super important as well.
Yeah.
Well, let's drill down just a little bit. I have this, the first best case use of insurance, right, is I need to go and rent some equipment, right? And for the 48 especially, we've got deals for city producers this year. City Lease is offering free lighting equipment to city producer or to team leaders for the 48-hour weekend if they have the insurance to manage it. Light bulb rentals has got discounts on camera and lighting gear. But there's also equipment that people can rent in Studio Me or Silent Visual Media. And sometimes they'll accept a credit card deposit for a very tiny rental, but you know that very quickly that's not going to get it done. You're going to actually need insurance. What types of insurance do they need, and how can they get it? What do they need?
Yeah, well, typically from most of the coverages and requirements that we've seen, most rental houses at the minimum need the equipment insurance coverage. So that's going to cover all their gear for theft or accidental damages, right? That's the most important thing that they're really invested in and concerned about, because they have a financial interest, right, in this gear going out. So first and foremost, that is the first coverage that is always required. And the other one that we also see on top of that is general liability insurance, right? They're concerned that if the equipment being used on this, rental injures, like I said, a random bystander, spectator, that they're going to maybe get dragged into a lawsuit, right? So that's why they usually at the minimum want the equipment insurance and the general liability insurance. Now, if you're dealing with the auto rental, right, like a vehicle, grip truck, something like that, then they're going to want the non-known and hired auto liability and physical damage coverage. So that's going to cover the rented vehicle, right? For any liability lawsuits, right? If you're driving the vehicle and you hit somebody, you get sued, or if it just gets stolen or you drive it into a wall, so you want to make sure that that's covered. Those are honestly the main ones we see. And to talk about that just a little further, it's very important that when we talk about equipment insurance, that you get the right one, right? Because there's a lot of, oddly, even insurance brokers, I have to say, don't even, if they're not specializing in the entertainment industry, they don't provide the right policy, which is kind of dangerous and scary. If you work with a broker who's not dealing with entertainment, specifically insurance, they can set you up with the wrong kind of policy, such as a property policy, right? That's actually not going to cover this stuff. It's you really need a inland marine equipment floater, or they call it an equipment floater, that covers miscellaneous equipment. So it's very important. Again, like I said, I just wanted to, because we've gone down this road where, there's a client who will provide a property insurance certificate, and even in the writing, it says it covers the rented equipment. And when there's a claim, it doesn't. So you have to really double check that.
Hey, I just wanted to take a second to welcome Elad. Elad, can you hear us?
I can, yeah. I'm sorry, you actually, I'm Leo. You sent the link to a lot, so I was there as a guest for the last few minutes.
Oh, hi, Leo. Yes, thank you so much for joining us. Leo is with Skywatch, which is a dedicated to providing easy-to-use, tailor-made aviation insurance that ensures peace of mind. Their products include drone insurance, aircraft renters insurance, and aircraft owners insurance. So thank you so much for showing up from Skywatch, Leo.
Thanks for having us.
We'll come back to you in a second, Leo. We're talking about rental insurance right now. So I get this insurance. It's called inland marine. Why do they call it inland marine?
Aylene, you want to explain that one?
Yeah, so it's an old insurance term that has evolved over time. It actually came from the phrase or the term ocean marine insurance, where back in the day people used like ships, right, to transport equipment across continents. And now it's evolved into what's called inland marine. So people are always like, oh, I'm not going to use it over water. There's nothing to do with water really. So don't be, I guess, confused by that terminology. It literally just means equipment coverage for things that are movable or transportable. And that's what equipment insurance is, right? That's what production equipment is. When you're renting a camera, you're not just using it in that one particular location, you're moving around with it, right? And so it's called a floater policy as well, because the idea is that the insurance floats with the gear wherever the gear is. But it is called an inland marine equipment floater policy technically.
That's the best explanation I've ever heard for that. That helps me know what that is now.
Okay.
We have a question from Joe Bucci, and I just want to invite Joe to ask his question. 1 second. Go ahead, Joe.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Hey, so this goes with like picking the right coverage and everything. I'm on your website now looking at this, and as everyone knows, a lot of times we don't know what is going to am I muted? Why is it saying I'm done talking?
No, you're not done talking.
So I'm on your website now, and it's like it's asking questions that a lot of us won't know answers to. Like, so since we're coming up with the stories, on the day for the 48, like, will there be stunts? Like, a lot of times we won't know, like, because I know a stunt can just be considered just, oh, someone falls down. So like if we're signing up for insurance and everything, do we just include everything? Because we're not going to use half of that. Like, is there a way to tailor-made that it's like, all right, we can come back and we can add that like the day of, because we only have 48 hours? Is there, or how would you recommend going
Yeah.
about something like that?
I see what you mean. Yeah. And we've actually helped insure a lot of these projects. And it's a little tricky, right? Because you're kind of making it up so quickly. But what we usually tell people is that, hey, look, if you're going to have a stunt, it's going to be very expensive. Right. So we let them know all these stunts that are considered stunts, right? And actually, it will kind of affect the way that they create the film, right? You know, can you do it in post, or, you know, I'm not sure what the parameters are, but you kind of steer away from those things, especially because if you do have a stunt, it gets very tricky for the insurance.
I want to add that and say that as somebody who has done stunts and had, you know, obviously injuries and such, you definitely want to be covered if you're doing it. So, you know, it because anything could happen. That's not an area you ever want to risk. So,
Right.
yeah, I would avoid stunts if you can, as you said. But if you are going to do it, don't just do it. That could affect your entire career if something goes wrong without the proper coverage.
Thanks, Joe. I'm gonna mute you now.
Oh, I wasn't? Okay, great.
Here, I'll figure this out 1 second. Disable talk. There. Now Joe's back with everybody else. I'm still learning. Let's go back to the equipment coverage for just 1 second, though, because I think there's some finer points there that I just want to make sure that we hit before we move on. I love Joe's point, though. That's great. So when I get the insurance policy so that I can rent the gear, I have to figure out what I'm going to sort of rent in advance, right? Because you get it for a certain amount. And like, I know, because I've rented things from CineLease and other equipment providers in the past, like light bulb rentals. And if you want a high quality dolly, like a Fisher 11 dolly, you're going to need bare minimum $100,000 of equipment coverage. That's the bare minimum. They won't let you rent the dolly, depending on the camera, how much, you know, there's a minimum requirement based on your sort of rental needs. So you got to figure out what you're going to rent so that the equipment provider can tell you how much insurance you need. And you can sort of get a basic policy that is at a certain level, but there can be a limiting factor either way if you're not sort of covered.
But not only that, but also, you know, certain intricacies as far as how they require the coverage. Like, you know, the dollar amount, the coverage amount is obviously very important, but also you have things like unattended vehicle coverage, which is rare from what I understand, because you have a lot of vendors, even locally, that won't rent to somebody if that's not covered, and you have an insurance company cover it because it's unattended. So you get into these little tricky spots where you have to actually, you know, you actually have to either have the coverage worded a certain way, which is not standard, or sign a, you know, put down a massive deposit on a piece of equipment. So I think it's really that. It's no matter what, just figure out what type of equipment you're using before you even, you know, take a swing at how much coverage you need.
What is it? Let's talk about a couple terms that end up on this in terms of basic insurance coverage. Additional loss payee, additionally insured, replacement cost basis. What is this stuff?
Aylene, you want to go in this one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So basically, these are insurance terms, right? So additional loss payee, it's typically meant for the vendor who actually owns the equipment, right? When you're renting from CineLease, for example, they're going to require a certificate of insurance that's going to say CineLease is named as additional loss payee. And that certificate is what we, as the broker, would issue to you as the renter, so that you can provide that insurance to CineLease, right? And what that loss payee wording means is just in the event of a claim, let's say you damaged equipment, right? And now the insurance, you filed a claim with the insurance, and now the insurance is going to go and pay, you know, the replacement cost value. Let's say that lens is $20,000, right? Now they're going to pay the replacement cost value $20,000 minus, let's say, the deductible for your insurance policy is $1,000. Let's just make the math easy. So now minus that $1,000 deductible, the insurance company is now going to issue a check to somebody for $19,000, right? $20,000 minus the $1,000 deductible. If CineLease has a loss pay certificate, the insurance company can actually issue that check that claim payment check directly to Cinelease, right? So it doesn't have to go through the renter, right? You as the renter, John Doe, they don't have to issue that to you. They can issue it directly to Cinelease. If Cinelease does not have that certificate of insurance that says lost payee for them, then what will happen is the insurance company would then issue a certificate to you, John Doe, who is the renter, and then you would have to issue that payment to Cinelease. So it just, basically cuts out that middle person. They're just able to issue that certificate directly. Additional insured is basically, it's typically when you have a general liability policy. So for example, let's say you're filming somewhere, like at a location, right? Like a homeowner, right? Someone where you need a home to basically film like a home scene or whatever. And that certificate of insurance will name that homeowner as additional insured. And what that means is if, basically, let's say something happens, right? And someone got sued outside, or someone got injured outside, like a bystander, right? And that bystander realizes, oh, this is actually a film shoot. Well, I'm going to go ahead and sue everybody. I'm going to sue the film production company. I'm going to sue the owner of the house. I'm going to sue everybody who's involved with this production because I got injured outside. Well, if that homeowner has an additional insured certificate from you as a filmmaker, if they get dragged into that lawsuit, your policy, your insurance policy can actually defend them in that lawsuit. And so that additional insured wording is very important. You'll see that a lot on film permits. You'll see that a lot on locations, whenever you're renting a location to film in, you'll see that a lot. Studios will require that as well. We're seeing that a lot more for even rental vendors where they want to be named lost payee and additional insured, right? So like, let's say you rented some lights and the lights exploded and hit somebody, and now all of a sudden they realize, oh, this is a rented piece of equipment. Well, I'm going to sue, Cinelease or whoever owns that equipment because I just want to make sure I sue everybody in this scenario, right? So same thing. If you issue a certificate with them as additional insured, your policy would then defend them in the case of a lawsuit. I think there was one more. You said lost payee, additional insured, replacement cost basis. I think that's the last one. So replacement cost basis is really important when you're renting equipment. I think someone mentioned this before. You want to make sure you understand how much gear you're renting. You want to know what exactly you're renting ahead of time, right? Because that will dictate the replacement cost value of everything you're renting. So let's say you're renting from one place, right? Cinelease, I keep going back to them as an example, and you're renting 50,000 worth of gear to them. That's the replacement cost value. So you're saying that if there was a total loss, right? Like let's say everything blew up in a fire, right? 50,000 is how much the total replacement cost value is of that particular rental. Now, one thing that I'll end with in terms of answering this question is that total replacement cost value on your insurance policy, that is a total limit. So let's say you're renting from 2 different places and you're renting 50,000 each, from 50,000 from Cinelease, and let's say 50,000 from light bulb rentals, right? The total replacement cost value is not now 50,000. Now it's 100,000. So you want to make sure that's not a shared limit. And this is a very common misconception when it comes to renters or people that are starting out. That is a total limit of everything you're renting from everybody combined. So I just want to point that out because it's definitely a big sticking point. Okay.
This brings up a really interesting point. I've got so many questions, but for everyone. But this rental certificate, this is an ACORD cert, right, or an ACORD cert? Is that how you say it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
ACORD cert.
How easy is it to get? How do you get names on it? How does it work for your companies? But I mean, that's an important thing, right?
Yeah, the Accord certificate is like the standard insurance certificate, right? That your broker who basically you place the policy with is supposed to issue, right? Now with Athos, since we do this, we actually have like a really cool online system where once you have a policy, you can go and issue it on our website, right? Provided that there's not like some special wording that has to be changed. If there is, then we have to manually do it, which we do a lot too. But these certificates have to be issued by your broker or through a system that your broker has provided you. So you cannot go and get an Accord certificate that you got and go and change stuff yourself. That's not okay. So just make sure that anything that happens with that, it always comes from the insurance broker. And that's part of the service, right? When you buy these policies, that's the final document. That's like the end goal, is to get that document. Once everyone, the rental house has that document, that's it. That's the last thing they need. So if you have a broker who's great at getting you a good rate, right, but is so slow with the service, it's not a good thing, right? So you want to make sure you have someone who's good, competitive, responsive, and can provide you that Accord cert at the end quickly.
Brian, how often are you using Accord certs? How often is it part of it?
Always, everything. Yeah, we use it. It's for everything. So yeah, you're constantly issuing for everything, every equipment, every location, everything. So
yeah,
and it's just it's so I know for me, I have insurance, and the way that I use my Accord certs is I get the person's name, I get their address, I provide. It's free. I can get as many certs as I want, right?
Correct. Yes, as long as the equipment rental, right? You can't just keep adding rental houses on there. You have to be mindful of the limit that you have. But yes, as long as that total falls under what you have on the policy, yeah, you should be able to get that free. Like, it's not like an additional cost or anything like that.
Sweet. I want to flip over for a second to get Leo involved in our conversation, because Leo's doing so much with drones, and drones are a common thing that people are using. Of course, there's always a chance they can fall out of the sky. Leo, what can you tell us about drone specific insurance? So why do I need it, and how do I get it, and how long do I get it for?
Great question, PJ. So specifically looking into the film industry, which is a very common case that we have regarding drone insurance in general. The most common that we see, similar to what Katherine said, is our monthly and annual options, because as Katherine said, regarding the film industry, it's very common for someone to have a short-term gig for a couple of days, which we also offer by the day. But like Katherine said, because of the fact of the planning and all the equipment that's rented, we typically see this on a monthly and annual basis. The reason why, first of all, for obvious legal reasons, in order to start an event, you're going to need to show the Accord forms, especially in film. Working in California, you're also going to need to work with the county and the city of LA, which require lots of additional loops to and processes to do, where one of our brokers needs to officially and formally post it on their broker website. So before any shoot usually takes place, the documents needs to be set up. And then on top of this, there's additional risk usually for these types of events, especially if it's regarding previously mentioned stunts or anything extreme. That's why we also see a higher limit for these cases. Our average, for example, limit for typical users is $1 million. We very commonly see at least $2 million as the minimum required amount for these types of projects.
Interesting. And you said it could be shorter, though. If somebody's coming in to do a quick drone shot, they're bringing their equipment to set, and they're saying like, all right, we're going to use the drone for 3 hours. They can get a one-day policy.
That is correct, yes. So we also offer hourly coverage, which can be purchased in bundles for 8 hours and up. So that's completely okay. In most cases, we do see the monthly option, even for these shorter amounts. We also recommend this because things can be versatile. If you purchase coverage by the hour, and if the shoot takes place, if something prolongs itself by like 30 minutes, you'd rather just be covered in advance for the whole month.
Awesome. Thank you. I want to come back for a second and talk about some of these other coverages and sort of think about use cases. So let's talk about rental of a location or even getting a location for free. The insurance that I might need that day. Brian, what do you think what types of things have locations asked for?
I mean, the standard seems to be $1 million, and then you know, the women on the panel could certainly answer that better than I could, but that's what I've run through. Is we just sort of, you know, we've never, yeah, it's very rare that you can get somebody to accept less than that. So
Yeah,
Mhm.
I would. That's definitely the case for sure. It's typically $1 million is the standard. You will have some locations that will require more than that, or the aggregate limit will be 2 million, for example. And so you would just have to let us know what those limits are, and
Right.
then make sure that your policy has enough limits to satisfy those requirements. But typically, it starts with 1 million per occurrence and 1 million aggregate, but it can certainly be higher. Sometimes, if it's a location that's really, expensive to film there, we see limits as high as like 5 million, 10 million. And at that point, you would get what's called an excess liability policy to basically increase your original $1 million limit to satisfy the requirement.
And I know specifically just insurance that I've gotten, or when I've gotten locations, I can get sometimes now this is in Pittsburgh. This is in Los Angeles, right? We're in Pittsburgh. So, but in Pittsburgh, I can get locations for free sometimes. And being able to give them an insurance certificate to know that their favor is not going to come back and bite them in the butt is so helpful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
But-
I think a lot of times people will say, oh gosh, the insurance is more expensive than what I'm paying to rent the location, right? Because sometimes it is free, right? And so, and that, yeah, that's great. We always say that's amazing that you get to rent this location for free. But like you said, to your point, you want to make sure you're protecting those locations as well, especially when they're doing you a favor, right? They certainly don't mean to say you shouldn't have insurance. That's different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and to add to that too, it's yes, the general liability is important, which I kind of touched on earlier, but you really want to make sure that that policy covers the third party property damage. That's actually what the homeowner or the location is really concerned about, is if you damage things in the space. Let's say you ruin all their hardwood floors, or you punch a hole in the wall, or I don't know, whatever happens, or something goes through the wall. You want to make sure that that policy includes coverage for that. And if it doesn't, it needs to be added on. That's the third party property damage for the location.
And I think that's the part where it's important to also talk to your broker.
Exactly.
Because whereas an equipment vendor would know the coverage they need, a homeowner likely would not. So, yeah.
I've got 2 or 3 more questions for you, and then we're going to open it up. First question is, Brian, you've worked with SAG actors.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes SAG requires insurance. Do you know what they're requiring? And because that's an important thing to understand. And maybe you folks from Athos know about this too, or even Leo.
Does somebody else want to jump on that?
Oh
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Aylene. I was waiting for
better.
Yeah, so SAG requires general liability and workers' comp. Those are the 2 main coverages that they require. Very rarely will they waive those requirements. So at the very minimum, they want to make sure your general liability is covered, right? These are legal liabilities that you're sued for, whether it's location specific or injuries to a third party, right? And workers' comp. So people that you're hiring, your cast and crew, they're covered in case they suffer a production related injury or illness. So those are the 2 main coverages.
Right. On the drone side, by the way, this has not been the case. It's not something that's been mandatory on the drone side from our experience.
Good to know.
On that same note, on the workman's comp that SAG requires, also if you're dealing with the Screen Actors Guild, you're likely, unless it's a short film agreement, you're dealing with a payroll company, and most of them offer workman's comp because the actor is technically an employee of the payroll company, not the production company. So that's another thing to look at. If you have just a few actors, it might be a cheaper way to go to just go under their policy. But if you end up with, 10 or more cast members,
Yeah.
you're better off just buying a policy yourself, and it'll be cheaper.
Yeah, and we
Good
actually
point.
we recommend that to our clients sometimes. We ask them first, are you working with the payroll company? Because if you are, especially entertainment payroll company, really is what they have to work with, then they
Right.
can get the work comp through them, and then we can carve in on the other stuff, right? We can come in and fill in the gaps, with the other coverages and stuff.
Right.
Mhm.
Brings up
more-
an important point, because you're not working for the production company, right? Where oftentimes on these larger productions, we're working for the payroll company.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right.
Is there something called volunteer coverage? Do you know about that? Or maybe-
Volunteer,
Yeah, volunteer.
maybe like travel accident.
No, I mean, like, a lot of the productions that folks are making, they're making an independent short film, and nobody's actually working for anyone. They're like, I'm volunteering here. So
Oh,
if something happens to them, is that just under general liability? And they say, like, I'm just a volunteer. Everybody's just volunteer. We're just making this project together.
no, they're still considered the cast and crew, so they still need to be covered by the workers' comp.
Oh, so they can be
Yeah.
covered by workers' comp even if they're not being paid.
Yeah, so that's the tricky part. If you're using a payroll service that's not actually paying anything, then that situation is where it may not work actually. So you
Yeah.
probably do have to get an actual workers' comp policy, not through payroll.
Okay, great. There's so much to talk about. Where can people learn more? What are good resources to get a deeper understanding? Because there's so much that we could talk about. We could go on for another hour easily.
I mean, they can look at our website. I'm just
But
kidding.
I think that's a really good spot, right? Because I looked at your website and I saw a ton of information.
Yeah, we pump a lot of information out there. We write articles all the time. But really, I say just call us, because that's all we do all day. We have people call us all day asking things. They feel bad, right? They say, I'm so sorry, I'm so new. And we're like, no, 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 no. Like, this is our job. Our job is to educate you. So don't feel ashamed to ask, even if what you think is like a dumb question. There's no dumb questions. We want to help people. So if you really want to find out, just call a broker, right? Obviously I'm going to plug myself, but Athos, because this is what we do, and we don't like charge for a consult. We don't do that. We can talk to people for hours and they don't buy anything. Obviously we don't love that, but we will still do it, and that's our job, is to help.
Is it the same for you, Leo? Is there information on your website?
For sure, yeah. So first of all, our website also is dedicated specifically in portions to the film industry, because it is more complex than other types of production, other types of flights to cover. Another tip that I'd recommend specifically with a film is to also kind of speak with the other production companies, or the place where you're renting or using the space for free, and kind of gathering all the requirements in advance, because there can be lots of last minute changes and things that the production company did not expect or think that you need to have as coverage. So having all of this forwarded to our team before you purchase anything, like Katherine said, we're happy to also just provide advice first. This can really help us send over exactly what you need and give you a peace of mind moving forward.
Mhm.
All right, let's open it up to just a few questions. We only have a few minutes left, but who has questions here? Let me see. I see Joe Bucci's hand. Does anybody else have a question? Oh, because Joe got to ask one already. All right, we're going back to Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
Hey guys. So this question is mainly directed towards Brian. So whenever I know a lot of us, we build pitch decks and everything like that to try and make our movies. Whenever you're budgeting out something, like you're doing your rough first draft of a budget, is there a percentage that you usually use to of your overall budget? Is there like a flat fee that you usually use? Yeah, that's it.
I believe the standard is 3%. However, I don't think that translates well when you get to a lower budget, because on a short film, your entire budget, maybe half of your budget, or more. So yeah, but yeah, on a standard feature, I would say 30%. Is that? But the others on the panel could correct me if I'm wrong on that. That's just what I kind of figured. That must be right.
It's so hard for us to answer that.
Yeah.
'Cause it depends on so many factors. I wish it was that easy to just say, this is the budget here, what's the price? There's just so many factors, like what is there stunts, what are you
Right.
doing, what kind of coverages? Yes, but I would say 3%, I've heard that as well. And I think it probably does work for the larger, projects, but when you're dealing with the small projects, what's actually happening is you're hitting a lot of minimum premiums, right? So minimum premiums are just like the absolute lowest that a policy can even be, right?
Right.
And so sometimes it's even worth it to see, well, what is even the minimum? What's the starting? And if that's like not in your budget, then that's kind of where you may have to rethink some things, right? So, but yeah.
Also, too, to add to that is that the equipment is the same. It still has that. The equipment is what it is. Those
Right.
that require that certain amount of coverage. So,
Yeah.
that's the tricky part. But yeah, that's probably. I hope that's a decent answer, Joe.
No, that worked perfectly. Would you include that like E&O in general and like umbrella all in that 3%, or would you split that?
Not E&O unless it was a larger budget, because that's a pretty expensive policy. Because to get E&O, you need title reports and copyright reports. You're $4,000 into it before you even buy the policy, just into the report.
Yeah,
Right.
Sure.
that's true.
Yeah.
All right, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Any other questions? Great, we've answered so many questions.
Yay.
Just so people know where to find you folks, if they want to ask more questions, it's athosinsurance.com, ATHOS insurance.com. Their website is expansive, but there's a way to write and reach out to you folks, right, Katherine, right?
Yeah. And we pick up the phone all like during our business hours. We always pick up the phone. That's what people love about us, is that we'll get back to you. We're responsive. And if you have questions, we're not annoyed, to answer the question.
And Leo, you're at skywatch.ai, right?
Right, and we can be reached at support@skywatch.ai for any broker-related questions.
And if people want to reach Brian Hartman, should they do that, Brian?
I just want to end with a final piece of advice to filmmakers: is don't be intimidated by all of this, because I probably know what I've spoken to this call, and I've been doing this a long time. Ask the experts, ask the vendors, ask the locations, find out the requirements. I'm by no means I know more than I did 20 years ago, but not much more. And I still continue to do it. So ask the experts and check with your vendors, find out what you need and talk to your brokers, and that engagement is everything. You don't have to be in any way intimidated by any of this. There are people there to help.
Before we go, John Stefanis would like to join us. John works at Cine Lease and has for quite a while. He is an equipment provider, so I'd like to allow him to just pop in here. Go ahead, John.
Hello?
Hi, John, we hear you.
Okay, good, because I'm not familiar. We usually use Teams, so I'm not familiar with Zoom, and I don't have, let's see any functions here for me. But I just wanted to add from our end, what Katherine and Aylene said, we usually go for the blanket insurance certificate, first of all. And we provide that. So when a customer calls our accounting department specifically, I can't see if Luz Garcia is on this call. I can't see participate.
No, she is.
Yeah, she will provide the information to the parties requesting the insurance. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm not sure who's all on this meeting here. So I wanted to let you guys know that, how we operate. So it'll go to them, and then I guess they would contact you to get those insurance needs. So, and we can provide the placement cost of insurance. Yes, so that's no problem. So, yeah, that's how it will come from us through our accounting team. And that's it. And I
Sweet.
like your banners in the background. That's great.
Thanks, John.
All right, all. Take care. Look forward to working with you guys.
Thank you.
All right, you guys. Well, thank you so much for being on this panel and helping to educate filmmakers. It really means the world to me to see more films, especially get made in Pittsburgh, but anything we can do to get things made safely and be able to help people whenever whenever something bad happens. Hopefully it never happens. Hopefully it never happens. But
Yeah.
thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Guys.